We have Noel Cyr from NBCUniversal here. Noel's been in this space for many, many years. I met him when he was first at Disney, and then he moved over to NBCUniversal. What he's going to talk about today is really ties into everything that we're doing about AI. The semantic layer and the unification of data in a consolidated way is the way that AI really flourishes in companies. All right, Noel's been working on this project for a while now. I think NBC's been a customer of ours for almost 20 years, I think. But Noel's based in New York. Big part of the MicroStrategy infrastructure at NBC around their ad sales platform. NBC is a customer of ours as well in their parks and other parts of their business. But with that, I'll just say, Noel, have a great session. Make this interactive because I want people to walk away going, hey, you know what? We're doing some of that, but we're really not doing it that way. And Noel has a great way to look at data. All right, and so anyway, have a great session.
Okay. As Jim mentioned, my name is Noel Cyr. I'm the Vice President of Business Intelligence and Analytics at NBCUniversal. My session for you today is how to steal the show with a unified semantic layer. Before we jump in, what would any BI presentation be without a little dashboard? So, I didn't realize when I put my picture on there that it would be so giant on here, but there it is. Hopefully, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, that the QR code is big enough. My focus at NBC is in our advertising sales organization. I'm based in New York. I've been in the BI space for about 20 years, a little over 20 years at this point. And I've used a bunch of different tools, mostly MicroStrategy. In other roles, I've used Business Objects, Cognos, QuickSight, a bunch of other tools. And then working in mostly the media space, but I've worked in a bunch of different industries and a bunch of different roles too. I started my BI career as a data engineer, moved into BI and report development. From there, went into product management, business analysis, and then for the past several years, I've been in leadership roles at Disney and NBCUniversal. So let's jump right into talking about semantic layer. So our agenda for today is obviously we're going to talk about the semantic layer, but before I do that, I wanted to talk about some of the problem statements that we were seeing, and the discoveries that we made as we started digging into those problem statements. And then with semantic layer, I'll talk about some of the real benefits that we're seeing and what's on the horizon now that we have unified semantic layer. There will also be a ton of time for questions, so get those questions ready. So we'll just dive right into the problem statements, big red screen. On our back end and front end developers are really tasked with having to build everything, every little thing for us. So that clogs up our backlogs, things as small as can you swap column A and column B on report X, to build us an executive reporting suite, so wildly different altitudes of requests. And because those backlogs are so full, some requests are either no longer needed or they are abandoned. And that's probably familiar to a lot of folks here. In this example, it's just a simple backlog example that shows things not getting done until 2026. And you can see words like build, add, update, replace, wildly different things. And likely the customer that's not getting their thing until 2026 is a frustrated emoji. Problem number 2 is inhibited analyses. We have at NBC a multi-instance, multi-project implementation, and each of those distinct projects serves its own specific purpose and is independently valuable. Where we're running into problems was being able to look across all of those projects to create more macro views of our business, largely for our strategy organization and our executive teams. So in this visual here, here's our 2 instances, each with 3 projects. So assume an analysis is needed across project B and project F. Our analysts are having a challenging time doing that, so there's our sad face emoji. And I want to be clear here that the issue is not that MicroStrategy can't do this for us, because we can absolutely use the MicroStrategy connector to import data across projects. It's either that the analysts don't know how to do that, or they won't take the extra steps to do that. So why not make it easier for them? So our analysts are compelled to improvise, to do whatever they know how to do, however they know how to do it. And that really creates the problem of trust erosion. And the reason why that creates trust erosion is that all of these shadow BI, or we call it siloed BI at NBC, projects start popping up. So as they're compelled to improvise, these shadow BI projects pop up, and they're doing their own data preparation, their own calculations, and all of that is occurring outside of our BI ecosystem. So that eats up a lot of time, right? It takes them a lot of time to pull the data, to prepare it, to do their own calculations. They're often doing it in tools that are really not meant to do that. They create these giant Excel spreadsheets. This probably sounds familiar to a lot of you. And by the way, their results vary from analyst to analyst. So if we look back at our multi-instance, multi-project setup, assume an analyst wants to create that analysis that we talked about in the prior slide, export from project B into Excel, export from project F into Excel, and there's probably like a tertiary Excel that brings them all together, creates a bunch of calculations. They pull that into a PowerPoint deck, and with the headline, sales are up. Great. But there's another analyst that only uses the project B data, and they might be missing some important things, or they have slightly different calculations. Their headline is sales are down. And now we don't know who's right. And we get the confused emoji. So across all of our frustrated, disappointed, confused emoji business partners, we started working with them to better understand their needs and came up with a few key discoveries. So the first discovery was we needed to prioritize, right? We need to start taking a look at all of these different silos to understand what they're doing and really figure out what's going to be the most impactful thing to help them. So what we realize is that a lot of them were doing the same or similar things, which is great. That helps us, better prioritize things. And I didn't say it before, but we can only do this across known silos. So we also realized that we needed to set up a process to allow people to come to us and say, hey, this thing is taking me a long time to do. I really can't support this. I have a real job that isn't doing all of these things. So set up a process for them to come to us, tell us about the work that they're doing so that we have visibility into those silos. So assuming in this example here, we have these 5 silos, you can see across 3 of them, they're focused on some sort of revenue analysis. So the way that we would prioritize is say, we're gonna focus first on revenue-based analyses. So at this point, the silos are still silos. And we need to bring those silos together, and we need to do it in a way that promotes rapid iteration for proof of concept like work, which is our next discovery, which I've been calling for years, try it before you BI it. And by BI it, I really mean before we write the formal requirements, review that and analyze that with tech and have tech build that, we want to kind of like kick the tires on things, bring data sets together that haven't been brought together before, and prove or disprove hypotheses before we ask tech to build something. Because I think we've all been in the scenario where we've asked tech to build something, they build it, we give it to the user, and they said, this is not what I wanted, or the hypothesis has been disproven and we don't need this. So what we did at NBC is we stood up an analytics sandbox, which is actually owned by our business unit on my team. And we do that. It's kind of like analytics engineering. We take their offline data sets, we take data sets that we have in our data fabric, we blend it together in new ways, and we say, does this look right? If it doesn't, we rapidly iterate through that. There's no over process of it. So it allows us to move pretty quickly. And those results can be gleaned in days or weeks versus months or quarters. What this also does for us, it allows us to have a much more oversight and governance of what's happening in each of these silos. And if folks are interested, I can talk about it after the session, but we have a bunch of different certification levels based off of the types of analyses and where people are doing them. So for instance, in the sandbox that we've created, we give that a bronze level certification. So users still have a ton of autonomy. We're doing things in a bunch of different ways, but we have a little bit of oversight in terms of what's going on. We've centralized a lot of those silos. And then we have like silver and gold certifications, but we can chat about that after if folks are interested. So speaking of governance, our last discovery is a focus on semantics. And really what came to the surface here was, analyst A is calling it one thing, analyst B is calling it another thing. So in the example that I have prepared here, so assume we have 3 silos and they're each reporting a $10 million number, but one analyst calls it revenue, one calls it client spend, one calls it net dollars. The dollar value is the same, the terminology is different. We don't know if the terminology should be the same and the dollars should be different or vice versa. So we come to this path around making a decision on alignment versus context. And then conversely, we have date is this, date is that, date is another thing. Are they all the same date? Are they different dates? That's where we start to run into, are we speaking the same language or not? So context is important, semantics are important, words matter. Those are the kind of like 3 discoveries that we came up with as we started digging into those problem statements. So we took those problems, we took those discoveries, and we came up with a set of objectives that led us to the unified semantic layer. So the first one was our data. You can't just put a semantic layer on top of your data and it solves all your problems, right? There's some work that you have to do to consolidate and unify your data. So in this example that I have, assume that we have account data into different systems. And my version of consolidating it is, okay, let's just build one view that has both systems account data. But what if you have the same accounts in both systems with different IDs and maybe slightly different spellings? You need to do some unification. It's kind of like a master data management exercise. So the first part of it is like, which one's the right record? Choose which one's the right record. And then from there, you can create your unified view of account that still references all of the account data in the other systems. Repeat for every type of, every piece of data that you want to unify for. Easier said than done, but work like this makes the semantic layer even much more valuable to users because we're trying to create this like single point of access for users where everything is brought together and made easy for them. So second discovery, enable self-service. This is really kind of like the core of what our unified semantic layer empowers for us. So I'm just going to jump right into the example here. Going back to our multi-instance, multi-project setup, what if we had a unified instance that sat in parallel to those other still valuable instances and projects that serve specific purposes, but where we need to unify and bring things together and look across projects? Let's stand that up in parallel so we can better enable that single point of contact. Okay, so assume we have our parallel. I'm going to stay away from this cord as best I can. Our parallel instance of MicroStrategy. I'm looking for my mouse now. Here it is. That now allows us to do that analysis that we've talked about in the prior screens. So here, now we have our happy face emoji. So that's what we're ultimately after. And then also the application of governance, that's going to be key here. We talked about all of the consolidation of the data, the unification of the data. We can't really do that without having a good understanding of an agreed upon set of business terms and definitions. So we had to stand up, or we realized that we needed to stand up a data governance council across our business areas get everyone in the room talking, representation across the business, come up with that single business language, and then apply that to our data structures. Very simple visualization, very, very difficult task to do. And it's like my daily bane of my existence at NBC is getting everybody in the room and trying to get them to agree on calling things the same. And it's not always about speaking the same language. It's about adding context to the way that we talk about the business versus just forcing everyone to use the same words. So we talked about our 3 problem statements. Those problem statements led us into a set of discoveries. Those discoveries brought us to the objectives that kind of surrounded our project that we call Unified Semantic Layer, which is powered by MicroStrategy. So we're going to dive right in to actually talking about semantic layer instead of all of the problems. So this is my favorite slide in the deck. It kind of builds and kind of how we talk about unified semantic layer at NBC. So what do we mean when we say unified semantic layer? I often talk about it in 2 main sections, the back end and the front end. This is oversimplification of all of the power and the value that unified semantic layer provides. But in the back end, we're really putting the guts of the unified semantic layer together. So if you are, so essentially what it is a pre-modeled abstraction layer. So if you have a bunch of facts and dimensions, this is where we start to create all of our join conditions. They're specific to how you want to analyze the business. You could have multiple fact and dimension models that you want to employ here, but all of that is done in the back end of the semantic layer. All those connections are made, and users don't have to worry about that at all. And I always describe it as the semantic layer is really just telling our stored data how we want to use it. It's not actually storing the data itself. It's also aggregate aware. So if you have a series of fact and fact aggregates based off of what your analysts are selecting on the front end, the unified semantic layer will determine which is the most performant aggregate table that you want to use for that particular query. And this is all done with a black screen. That is all done for you. That code is written for you in the back end. And also there's explicitly defined hierarchies. If you don't have them already in your data, you can define those in the semantic layer. So a lot of this is, the back end, how the sausage is made. Users, they care that this exists, but they don't really care about how it all works. They're more interested in the front end. So we take what we need from all of those connections in the back end, and we organize that into a neatly organized set of attributes and metrics. And we categorize them what we call business categories, things like account, date, product. Those are like the sales terms that come to mind for me. But all of that's organized for ease of use. It's business friendly. And by the way, we've taken all of that certified terms and definitions from our governance board, and we've cemented those here. So whenever you see an attribute or metric here that aligns to something that is in our kind of unified business language. And again, the code is all written for you. You don't have to do anything. Supplied by all of our consolidated and unified data. So all that work that we did to bring everything together, choose a primary record, unify it, that is all what is fueling the back end of our semantic layer. And it's where we ingest, we store, we process all of the ETL on the business requirements, and it's optimized for analysis, right? There's a lot of work that we know we all do to optimize our data for reporting and analytics. So the front end helps us enable the self-service by neatly organizing everything. It helps us be consistent from analysis to analysis. Everyone's pulling from the same single pane of glass. And it's built by analysts. Our analysts can come in and do this thing on their own, and they can do it on their own because we've organized the data for them, it's governed, and it all aligns to our common business language so they know what it is. In the next screen, I'll talk about this optional prompted experience. We take it one step further. to just make it a much more guided experience to work with the semantic layer, but I'll talk about that in the next screen. And then over top of everything, and this is the last build of the slide, is our governance. We need to have governance across the entire life cycle of the semantic layer all the way back to the data from how we talk about the business. So this is what we call our world on a page for the unified semantic layer, and it's powered by MicroStrategy. So I mentioned I want to talk a little bit more about the prompted UI, and this is just a very basic mock-up of the prompt screen in library, but what we wanted to do was kind of create a diner menu for our analysts who maybe are not as technical or wanting to hunt and peck through all of the different screens in MicroStrategy. So this prompt allows us to say, like, here's all of the metrics that you have to select from, pick the ones you want. Here's all of the attributes, pick the ones you want. And then one thing that we do is create a bunch of predefined filters based off of different types of analysis that we want to do. So in the example here, we want to do a revenue analysis, revenue by month, and the filter that this particular analyst is using is a current year versus prior year East region filter. So for whatever reason, the East region might have some nuance to the way that they do revenue reporting, and I don't want to have to teach every analyst, you have to filter your report by these 10 filters every time to get an accurate East region revenue report. They can just use this predefined filter, and it just makes the querying, the pulling, is like 3 clicks, much, much easier. And by the way, each of these, as I mentioned before, objects has their certified business language and the definition that is available to see directly in that prompt screen. So like I said, we call this the diner menu. It's much larger in real life, but that's because we have a lot of attributes and metrics in our semantic layer, which the searchable feature helps with. So why are we doing all this? What benefits are we seeing out of the semantic layer? It all kind of comes down to data-driven decisions. So we categorize that in 4 different ways. More data-driven decision making. So if we take on the work of all of the data preparation and calculation and make the visualization a lot easier. Okay, so by us doing all of the work, all that preparation work for you, especially when we talk about consolidation and unification of data, a lot of that is happening in Excel spreadsheets, takes a lot of time. So freeing up those analysts to not do data preparation and data operations allows them to do more data-driven decision-making. So we're already seeing savings in the thousands of hours by implementing the first couple iterations of semantic layer. Okay, so faster data-driven decision-making. So by automating all of those data pipelines, data operations, previously, analysts can only do their reporting at the frequency that, they don't want to be chained to their desks and doing this every day, spending multiple hours a day. So they might only be generating analyses weekly or monthly or quarterly because they don't want to spend all that time doing it. But by automating this and making it available to them daily, we're seeing increases in time to insight by at least 7 times, because if we're thinking weekly to daily analysis, there's 7 times increase already. I'm trying to stand far away so you can still hear me. Okay. New data-driven decision-making. So by bringing together data sets that have not previously lived together, that enables new data-driven decision-making. And we can do more of it by operationalizing a lot of those data pipelines. I'm going to jump to the last slide so we can save time for Q&A. And there's only one more slide. So tons of benefits that we're seeing. And let me just find my mouse again. Okay, so what are we doing next? Now that we have semantic layer, and I'm just going to do all the builds before the screen goes black again. So with semantic layer, like what are the capabilities that we now have unlocked for ourselves that will be better enabled? So federated analytics, if folks are familiar with that, is essentially other tools outside of MicroStrategy that can access the MicroStrategy enterprise semantic graph. So we want to be able to meet our analysts where they are. We have some folks who use Power BI. We have some folks who use Tableau. A lot of folks still want to work in Excel. So why don't we make it easier for them? And that's what federated analytics will allow us to do. And of course, generative AI, if we want to be able to talk to our data like a human, we should apply a human language to our data. And that's a lot of what we've done with unified semantic layer. So that was the last slide, and I'm ready for questions if folks have them.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. And I wanted to ask, I see you've worked with Power BI, Tableau, and SAP Business Objects, I believe.
Yes.
So have any of these other products showed you any capability that can be compared to the MicroStrategy semantic layer?
I would probably say, like, if you're familiar with business objects, they used to have like universes, which are very much like semantic layers. I just think that MicroStrategy is a much more like updated, modernized tool that provides better capabilities from a semantic layer perspective. But a lot of them do offer like modeling, but they're often within the context of disparate analyses. MicroStrategy really kind of like offers like the enterprise view of a semantic layer.
All right, so that's why you choose it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again for the presentation. Very, very well done. Question for you around the governance council. How did you get? How is I think is the biggest question most of us have is how did you get everyone to agree upon the semantics of those?
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say, like, it's always a work. It's more about culture change than it is like the steps that you follow to get there. The way that we arrived there was just kind of showing our leadership that we have this problem. Like, we're not speaking the same language, and because we're not speaking the same language, we're confusing ourselves day to day. So, first of all, is like getting the justification in front of the right people to do that. And then it's just about getting the right people in the room. And we've gone through several iterations of standing up a very small group, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, inspect, adapt, we kind of took like a concentric circle approach, start small, go to the next circle, go to the next circle. But also it's not about forcing folks to agree on everything. It's really all about flexibility. There's no bad ideas. Let's have a conversation about it. And some conversations have been lasting for months and months and months. Some of them are easy. I wouldn't say there's like any clear like roadmap to success. It's really all about your business, what works for you.
Hi. What are you doing for governance around self-service? Like anything that's built by maybe not a analyst or someone like that gets ultimately published. Mm-hmm. And kind of in the same vein with federated analytics, right? Like someone uses the MicroStrategy data, but they're not necessarily, if they're using it in Excel or something, they could change the name of whatever.
Yep, totally.
And publish it. So what kind of guardrails are you putting around that?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the certification levels that I was talking about before. So we have 3: gold, silver, and bronze. So the bronze level certification is we're in our analytics sandbox, we're kicking the tires on things. If for whatever reason an analyst wanted to use something from Analytics Sandbox for a business report just to share with executives, we would say, you can do that, but it's bronze certified, meaning like we did all of the, the data preparation and you did all of the analytics, and we haven't really pulled this into any formal data structures. So, it comes with those caveats of, yes, you can use this, but it's bronze certified. And that's kind of like an agreed upon and known level of certification across the business. The gold certification is really about this is an enterprise, like corporate view of the business, and we need to have that completely managed by tech. And any change to that has to go through like the change management cycle. And we're trying to move fewer things through that pipeline so we can enable more people to do self-service and discovery, but with less autonomy comes greater governance and vice versa.
Hey, nice presentation. So I have two questions. So one is like, do you guys allow ad hoc reporting, allow your users to create their own report using their attributes and measures, or it is only the guided prompt-based reports?
Both, yeah. So they can go directly, like open up a dashboard, select existing objects, and then hunt and peck through all of the attributes and metrics there. And then we also offer the prompted experience for folks who don't want to go in and search around for things.
Okay. So on the ad hoc side, correct? So how do you govern or how do you manage or make sure that they are not choosing the wrong attribute or wrong attribute metric combination, which leads to some cross joins or unwanted, wrong sequels and all that?
Yeah, that's the glory of kind of like the semantic layer does all of the joining and the specific context for you. We don't gold certify those analyses though, right? We're just saying, we've pre-modeled the data for you and made it as easy as possible, but analysts are analysts, they can do what they want still. So there is some less amount of governance that comes with offering self-service. We're not endeavoring to say every report or dashboard that an analyst build needs to come through, governance and certification. So we'll give you the autonomy with some governance. It's up to you to take it the last mile.
All right. Then the last one is like, do you guys use personal views, bookmarks to handle some customizations?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we do have some kind of like predefined dashboards that with filtering, it is also kind of like self-service, but we've like built that for them to kind of interact with.
Thank you.
Yep.
Again, great presentation. Change management. Did people willingly give up their siloed applications?
Some do, and that's part of where we work with our analytics sandbox. Is we really just want to like take on the data operations piece